What is happening, guys? Welcome back to another video. We finally got in all the lift stuff for this 4Runner. We also got in our wheels and tires. So before I throw the lift on, I want to get the wheels and tires mounted just to have them ready for when the lift is done. We can just throw them right on the 4Runner and be done with it. So let's open up these wheels, let's check them out, and then we got to bring them over to Devin, my brother's. He's got a tire machine and a balancer, so we're gonna see what we can do with mounting these things up. So you can see here, we got a set of methods. Let's open these up, let's check them out, and I want to put one on the front just to make sure everything's gonna clear and everything's gonna work right before we mount these things on the tires. There we go, guys. These are the MR605. These are a 20 by 10. Should look really good on the 4Runner. Very excited to see what we're gonna be looking like. There we go. Everything is clearing just fine, like I figured. But I just wanted to make sure. So looking good. This thing is gonna look so good with these wheels. Really gonna flow with the rest of the truck, the rest of the theme, you know, being all black. And I suppose I show you the tires. Got them right here. These are the trail blades. These are the same tires I got on this truck. I've had these tires on just about every truck I've owned. I really do like them. They ride really nice on the road and they're not very loud. So these are a full 33 1250. Hopefully these things don't rub too bad. Well, guys, made it to the shop. Devin had to randomly go to Mexico or something, so we are here alone. You guys don't get to see him. So we got to figure out how to use the stuff. We got to get the compressor on. All right guys, we're gonna jump right into this. We gotta start the lift install. So jack it up, get the wheels and tires off, and then we got to pull the struts out, pull the upper control arms because I am replacing those. And we got the new struts and springs to install in the front end. And then the rear, we got the new springs and shocks. And then I also did the panhard correction kit. So it's basically a drop bracket off the frame and a bracket onto the axle that you weld on to get that panhard bar back in stock form. So get the axle centered and riding like factory. All right, so what we got to do, we got to replace the struts and the springs, but the new ones I got, I didn't have them assembled. They don't have the top hats and bushings and everything up top. So we got to get that off. And I'm going to show you guys one way to do it without having those sketchy spring compressors. You basically use the truck as the compressor. So usually you would take the lower ball joint bolts off so this lower control arm can fully swing and droop down. But being that I'm replacing the upper control arms, I think I'm going to disconnect the upper control arm, and then that will let the whole assembly droop down. Hopefully enough. If it doesn't work out that way, I'll have to pull those lower ball joint bolts and do it that way. But basically what you do is stick a jack under the control arm, take those bolts out, take this center nut off of the shaft of the shock, and this big nut is what's holding the spring onto the shock. So you do that. You loosen the control arm main bolts here, and then you just let the jack down and it decompresses that spring. And then you can pull the spring and shock out, and then they aren't stuck together, they're not bolted together, so you can steal the top hats and everything for the new setup. So let's get after it. You know, looking at this, I don't think I'm gonna be able to drop that lower arm enough with just taking the upper control arm off. There's just all the steering, the CV axle, I don't think it's gonna drop enough. So what I'm gonna do is get the jack under here. We'll pull the bolt holding the ball joint to the spindle here, and then we'll jack it up, get some spring pressure on it. We'll pull this top nut off, like I said, and then we'll just drop the jack down. And you might have to, like I said, loosen the main bolts, the cam bolts here on the frame to get that arm to drop enough. But we'll do that and see if we can get this out. All right, we got all 4 ball joint bolts loose. We got these 2 cam bolts here on the control arms. And then if you can see up top, this main center bolt or nut is off of the shock. So the whole spindle, everything is loose right now. All we gotta do is let down the jack, and that shock and spring should be able to come out. All right, that went really smooth. So you can see we got the spring and the strut disassembled. So now we got to get to this control arm. So I pulled the little guards off here and here. We got to take this main nut off, this cotter pin here, and then that nut. And then I just rented a little puller for the top of here to press the ball joint out of the control arm. So we'll get all that off, get the control arm off, and get the new one on. All right, this is the Pitman Arm Puller that I'm going to be using to get the ball joint out of the control arm. So there's the part number 27170. It's adjustable, but these bolts are too short. It doesn't expand enough to get around the control arm. So I just got my bolts bin and got some longer bolts. That way you can expand it a little bit more to get it over the arm, and then obviously tighten the bolt down and it should press that out. All right, to get that upper bolt out, that main bolt going through the arm, you got to take off the little bracket holding on this wire, and then if you can see underneath the battery, see that yellow connector, there's a little sensor right there the bolt is hitting on. So we got to unbolt that as well, and then that bolt should be able to slide all the way out. All right, we got the bolt and the control arm out, so now we got to get this ball joint out. So we got to pull the boot. There is a clip underneath the boot holding the ball joint into the spindle, and then I got this ball joint press, another rental from AutoZone for free. So we're going to use that to press the ball joint out of the spindle. All right, we finally got this upper ball joint pressed out of the spindle. So the ball joint press wasn't really working because these plates here hit the spindle before you can actually get it centered. So I wasn't able to use that plate. So what I had to do is grab just a regular steel plate and put that over the top of this sleeve here. But then you're trying to press on the ball joint, which moves around. So I ended up getting a big socket, putting it over the top of the ball joint like that, so I could press on the actual case of the ball joint and not on that stud. And with like another 3 or 4 hands, it would be easy, but trying to hold everything in place and tighten it proved to be a pain in the butt. So got it off. Either way, we are done taking stuff apart. So now we got to start putting it back together. Here are the control arms. You can buy these on Rock Auto. You can buy them from Summit Racing. They are the Mevotech, but they are 100% legit SPC adjustable arms. And I think somehow they just rebox them as Mevotech or Mevotech. Get the plastic off it. And there it is. So these are the updated arms with the new bushings and the new greasable ball joints. You can see there. So there's the ball joint. You can even see SPC right on the ball joint, and it's also labeled SPC, if I can get it, on these bushings as well. So these are a very good arm. The nice thing about it is they're fully adjustable. You can adjust the camber with this slot here, and you can adjust the caster by loosening this nut and adjusting this plate down here. So you can adjust it like that. You can pretty much adjust it wherever you want, and it pushes the ball joint wherever you want it. So I think what a lot of people do is start off in this position here. This is plus 2 degrees caster, and that is why we need these arms, is to give the truck more caster, because when you lift it, you lose a lot of caster and they don't drive that nice. So these arms are going to fix that. This is the sleeve that we got to press through the spindle. So this will go just like the ball joint would. It'll come up from the bottom, and then you can see there's a groove in the top. There is a circlip right here that we need to stick on there. And then the ball joint just goes right through there, and then you bolt that together. So we got to get this in first. We'll get the clip on, then we can get the arm bolted on the truck and get the ball joint in. All right, we got the arm on, ball joint, everything is good to go there. We got to torque that big nut, but I'm gonna wait until it's all back together. So what we got for springs and shocks is the Bilstein 5100 shocks, and then I did the OME 883 springs just because it's got a heavier bumper and everything on the front, so I wanted it a little heavier duty just to keep that front end up. So these shocks, I'm sure most of you guys know what the deal is with these. So they have an adjustable perch on it. You can just move this lock ring up and down to adjust the amount of lift, but with an aftermarket spring, they say you can only run it on the very bottom clip. So we're on the bottom clip there. We're gonna do the same thing as removal with the strut and spring. So we're gonna set it up in there, get the bushings and everything on the shock, and then jack that control arm up till the stud here comes through the top hat up top, and then we'll put the nut on, torque that down, and we should be good. All right, we are most of the way back together. I got to bolt up the ball joint, the lower ball joint, and I did buy a new set of bolts because I know those fail as well. I did check the ball joints and they do feel really tight, so I'm not gonna worry about it yet. I'll probably order some up and one of these days change the lower ball joints. Yeah, I know I should have bought some and done it while I had it apart, but not a big deal. It's really not that hard to change. So we got the new bolts we're gonna throw in the lower ball joint, and we are pretty much back together other than the sway bar and just a couple little odds and ends, and then we can jump on the other side. Well, there she is on her own weight. These springs hopefully will settle a little bit. This thing's pretty tall, and what I'm most concerned about is the CV axle angle. It's pretty steep. I might have to do a diff drop. I held out just to see kind of how it was looking and where it's at. I know these springs are going to break in and settle, but in the meantime, I don't want to burn up a set of CV axles, so we will see. I'll probably order up a drop kit for that differential, but really liking it so far. Wheels are looking really good. So now we got to turn this thing around and tackle the back, which is going to be a lot easier than the front. All right guys, we're at full lock right now, and the only place I see rubbing is on this little pinch weld right here. I had the same issue on my green truck, so I think what I'm gonna do is just kind of angle this fender back, cut that back, and then either cut or grab a sledgehammer and smash that seam in, so flatten it out, and we should clear. We're pretty far away from this body mount, so I'm not too worried about that. On the other side, everything up front clears like a champ, so you can see on the other side I already kind of trimmed out the fender liner, so I'm going to trim the fender liner here and we'll do a little bit of cutting and see if we can't get this thing to clear. Alright guys, we got a decent amount of clearance now. Well, next time I have the tire off, I'll probably clearance that a little bit more. What you're seeing right there is just a fender liner, but there's about 1 inch of clearance between the back of the tire and that little seam I pounded in. So I'm going to get on the other side and do the same thing. All right guys, it's the next day. We are getting ready to get this rear end done. So the rear should be a lot easier. Wheels, tires, pull that off. We got to pull the shocks off. We got to pull the panhard bar. I do have the bracket kit for that to correct it, like I said earlier. And then we got to swap the springs out. So pretty easy. Let's get this thing up in the air, get on jack stands, and tear it apart. All right, we're about ready to get these springs out. One thing you got to do is kind of unbolt some of these brackets for the brake lines so you don't tear them. So there's that bracket there, and then that one in the center there, and then unclip the ABS lines, give them a bunch of slack. And now we'll just have to push down on this side of the axle and we should be able to pop, oh yeah, just like that. Just pop the spring out like that. Then we can get the new one in, but first, I'm going to get the brackets welded on here without the springs in. It's giving me a lot more room to get in here and do a little bit of welding. So here's the mount for the frame. So this one actually slides over the frame like that. We're just gonna weld around the bracket to make sure it doesn't go anywhere on the frame. And then this one here is for the axle. So this should fit right down. Yep, fits really good right down in there. So we gotta clean all this up, clean the axle and the frame up, just grind it out, get it smooth, get all the rust off, and we can weld these on. Nice thing about it is they fit really good. So we're not gonna have to do any fit up, no grinding or anything to get them to fit right. Or just weld them in, burn them in, and then we can throw the new springs on. Alright guys, we are ready to weld these together. So got it all cleaned up, ready to go. We're gonna weld it on just like that. So one thing we gotta do first is anytime you're welding on the truck, you should disconnect the positive terminal of the battery. Just because the electricity, you can actually fry your ECU with welding on it. So we don't wanna do that. We'll disconnect the battery and then we'll get these welded in. Alright guys, we're just about done. So I got the panhard bar back in. There's only one hole on the axle side, but there is 3 holes you can use. You can use the factory hole, and then 2 other holes down below. Basically the way they explain it is you want the panhard bar straight and level, and right there in that second hole looks pretty level. So I think I'm gonna leave it right there. Plus these springs are gonna settle a little bit. So once they settle in, that should be about perfectly level. So we're gonna get this all bolted in. We got the sway bar to hook up, and I believe that's about it. Oh my gosh, guys, this thing looks so freaking good. Well, I know we're gonna need an alignment, but the alignment shop I was gonna use can't get me in till next week, so I gotta call around, find somewhere else to go. But let's go for a quick little drive, make sure everything seems normal, and then we'll get it aligned. Hopefully they can get it in spec. Should have no issues with these control arms. So the main reason for those control arms is to help with the alignment, get the caster back. So we'll see once we bring it to the alignment shop. Well, she definitely needs an alignment, but springs ride really good, really smooth, not too bouncy, not too stiff. So stoked about that. Also, you barely even hear these tires, so that's one of the reasons I love these tires so much. They're so quiet, they ride really nice on the road, and I think they look really good too. Well, I finally found a place to do the alignment. We dropped it off, got it aligned. Turned out really good. This thing drives surprisingly well for being lifted. I would highly recommend these shocks and springs to anyone. This thing drives so smooth, so comfortable. Very, very happy with how it turned out. And it also looks amazing. I am super happy with how it turned out and how it looks. Well, I'm gonna wrap this one up here, guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Go smash that thumbs up button, comment, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.